You've probably watched all the videos and tried all the techniques, and still, for you, manifestation isn't working. You find yourself in this life that doesn't match your desired state. And you've followed all the exercises and done what has been asked, and it doesn't seem to work. So I want to tell you today 5 reasons why that might be the case. Number 1 is that you don't understand the other universal laws. So there are a few laws that underpin the reality, quote unquote, that we live in. And with manifestation, most often people speak about 2 of them. It's called Hermetic Philosophy because it's based on a man named Hermes. Technically, it's Trismegistus. I probably spelled Magistus wrong, but Hermes Trismegistus is where we get Hermetic Philosophy. And in that philosophy, there are 7 different rules or laws or principles that the universe operates from. The lore is that Hermes Trismegistus may have come from the Atlantean times, so a different quote unquote race of humans. So the most common 2 that are taught that tie directly to manifestation, the first is called mentalism. And what this law states is that everything is mind. And the reason that everything is mind translates to manifestation is that, well, if the universe is simply a projection of, actually this is God's mental state, right? God's mind, but nonetheless, we are a fractional component of God's mind. If that is the reality, which it is, then we should be able to manifest by changing the way that we think about the world. And on one level, that is true. But on a much deeper level, you have to actually believe the way that you think about the world. You can't just say, okay, I think about the world this way. It's why affirmations oftentimes don't work super well. So that's one principle. The other principle that really ties to manifestation is what's called the law of correspondence. Probably going to spell correspondence wrong. That's okay. So the law of correspondence basically says, as above, so below. Or as within, so without. So you can see that that one, right, is all about if I change my internal state, which is what people talk about in manifestation all the time, right? If you put yourself in that desired end state, then the outside is going to start to show up in that same way. That's what the law of correspondence tells us, and it's absolutely true. However, there are other laws. And so if all you're doing is addressing these 2, you're going to run into some issues. So let me now list a couple of the other universal laws that I want you to be aware of so that you understand how they come together. So the next one is called the principle of cause and effect. And essentially, this is the law of karma, right? Do unto others as you would have them do to you. The golden rule. Because ultimately, that's what this universe is based on. So, if we believe the law of cause and effect, because again, it is true, that means that every single thing that you think, that you do, Every emotion that you have is a cause that goes out to the universe and will bring back an effect. So if you do all of your manifestation practices and you're in a good state and you're checking all the boxes, doing everything you're supposed to do, but then you move through the rest of your day and you're putting out all of these causes over and over and over again that cause difficult effects to come back to you, you're just battling against yourself. In other words, you have to be so much more aware of the things that you are putting out to the world, not just in your meditation time, not just in your manifestation time, but all the time. There's what's called, in the East, it's called the Akashic Record. It's a C, I do believe. And then in the West, it's called the Book of Life, and that comes from the Bible. Those are one and the same thing. But this is a place where every thought, every feeling, every deed is recorded by the universe. And it likely is how we can see the past and see the future, is there are humans that have an ability to tune into this Akashic Record. But the point of this right now is understanding that every cause that you put out affects the manifestation. And so you've got to learn how to start to work with your thoughts and work with your emotions. Another principle that isn't talked about with manifestation, but is a very important principle to understand and that impacts it directly, is the principle of rhythm, which means everything has tides or seasons. So things are always coming and going. They come to us, they leave us. In other words, there is divine timing. There is a flow to everything that happens in the universe. Remember, it's not just you here on Gaia, on planet Earth, it's all of us. And so the universe is, yes, going to give you what you are manifesting if you can honor all of the universal laws, but it also has to keep in account the earth and all the other beings and creatures on it. And so sometimes even when you do all of these things, it's just not the right timing. And so many people just surrender and give up because of that. But just when you give up, it's right on the other side. You're so close. So I really, really want you to stick with it. Okay, so that's our first piece. You don't understand the other universal laws. Moving on to our second one here in a second. Man, it's a beautiful spring day outside, even though it's the end of February here. And I am loving it so much. It makes my heart so happy. Okay, so the second one is you can't fake, sorry, I'm laughing, your frequency. Okay, so manifestation teachings. You raise your vibration, which raises your frequency. And when your frequency matches the frequency of the thing that you are calling into your life, it will appear. And on one level, that's true. And on another level, you can't fake your frequency. So you can't pretend, even momentarily, that you are, I take it back, you can pretend momentarily, or you can be there momentarily. But the universe knows, right? Remember that Akashic Record. The universe knows where you really and truly are. And I want to encourage you, it starts with these moments of breakthrough, oftentimes in meditation or stillness or quiet. But we've got to learn how to hold that frequency. That's when these things are going to start to pour into your life. So we've got to understand 3 different planes of being in order to deal with our frequency, in order to shift our frequency, to really and truly shift it. right? This is why the affirmation thing of like, I'm gonna have $10 million, I'm gonna have $10 million, I'm gonna have $10 million, and then you really feel into it, you feel it in your body, feel it in your heart, you feel it in your emotion, but then the moment you open your eyes and you go back into your life, it falls away. And so that's not your true frequency, right? We've gotta make this shift happen permanently. So there are three different subtle bodies. And the first one is what's called your physical body, right? That's the most dense, it's matter. The second one is what's called the astral body, also known as the emotional body. And the third is the mental body. So we've got to shift not just our mental state. So not just thinking about that $10 million, right? Not just putting it in our mind, not just seeing it in our mind's eye. All of that is thought, right? And people talk about that, and that's great. Then the astral body, I've got to feel it, right? And I know people talk about that in manifestation too. It's not good enough to see it. You've got to actually feel the emotion that's tied to it. And that happens through physical sensations in the body, right? It's this deep, these things, when we shift our mental state and our emotional state, they are physiological hormonal changes that happen. Now, where it gets interesting is all three of these things come together and bridge up to a higher dimension in what's called the causal body. And this is ultimately the body of your soul. It's the part of you that is constantly being refined, that has a dharma, a lesson that it needs to learn as you come back to the planet this go around. And so in order to change our frequency, we've got to change the frequency passing through the causal body as well as the other higher bodies, which are, I'll just quickly list them. I'm not going to talk about them right now, but the Buddhic, the Atmic, and the Monadic are these higher bodies. So when you really and truly have a frequency shift, you will know it. Everything starts to feel better. You start to feel supported. You feel so much less stress. You believe in yourself and in the world again. You have this sense of innocence that washes over you. So you've got to learn how to actually change your frequency. And I'm going to save that for another video. Another thing to remember here is this Akashic record. So the Akashic record is going to know whether or not your frequency has actually shifted or not. Right? It's if you are able to shift for 20 minutes, that still leaves 23 hours and 40 minutes in the day. So to make this permanent shift and permanent change, there is deep, deep work that needs to be done. And that's why a lot of people promise manifestation as a quick fix, and it can be, but it is all dependent on how fast you can let go of your past and how much faith you can find in your present. And when that happens, your frequency will begin to change for real. All right, moving on now to our third reason that this isn't working for you. And this is just 5 that came to me quickly. There could be lots of other reasons too. So number 3 is you are attached to the outcome. This is a biggie. The universe has a thing with attachment, and I'm not exactly sure what it is. However, anything that you feel a strong attachment to is grounds for suffering. It's something that the universe is going to use to teach you a lesson. Because ultimately it's not about this plane of reality. Now we're on this plane of reality and we can manifest some really cool things in this plane of reality, but we've got to not be attached to it. That's the great paradox here. So attachment binds you and it limits your options. So what I mean by saying is attachment binds you is that you get super hyper focused. You get wrapped in what you are trying to manifest. And when that happens, we get laser focused on one way of getting there, on one way of things happening. But the universe works in magical ways. So the option that you think is going to happen is almost never the option as it actually happens. And it's your attachment to that option that stops you from seeing the 9 billion other ways that this thing might come to you. The universe does the craziest things. We think we want to go to Bali on vacation, and yet there's no way that we can possibly afford it. And then all of a sudden, we win this sweepstakes that we didn't even know we entered because our friend put it in us, and we get this vacation to Bali, right? You couldn't be attached to that outcome because you didn't even know it was a possibility. But that's the way that the universe works when we are able to actually truly change our frequency and slip into these different ways of moving through the world. Next up is your frequency gets pulled to disappointment. And that stops the flow. So when we are in a frequency of disappointment, because we were not able to detach from an outcome and something came that we were not expecting, that rips our frequency down, right? That is a victim frequency. Oh, poor me, this thing happened to me, and it wasn't the thing that I wanted to happen. And you better believe that Akashic Record knows what you're thinking and what you're feeling in that moment. And so the moment that you get disappointed, your frequency gets torn down, you no longer match the desired frequency, and you no longer get the end state that you were wanting. So we've got to learn to lessen our attachments. And then finally, the universe, and this is a fun one, I swear it's true, rewards play. So Alan Watts has a quote that says, the reason, I'm paraphrasing here, but the reason humans struggle is they take so seriously what the gods made for fun. And I am telling you, that is the truth. The universe wants us to have fun. God, whatever you want to call it here. It's about play. It's about joy. It's about lightness. And you've got to move through the world with that sense. And a lot of times when we are trying to manifest something, it's because we are in a state that we don't enjoy. It makes it really hard to be innocent and really hard to play. I get it. But it's exactly the thing that is keeping you stuck. We've got to learn to let go a bit, return to being a kid, stop caring so much, which I know is wild because our advice in the West is you got to work harder, you got to bust your butt if you want to change your life, and you do need to take action. I'm not saying that. But any action taken from a place of struggle is not going to yield fruit, or it will yield fruit, but it'll be the fruit that you've had, not the fruit that you want. All right, next, number 4 is another fun one. I mean that in maybe a not so fun way. And this one might be a little bit hard to hear. So bear with me. And I know a lot of you are gonna be like, oh, come on, I want this more than anything in the world, but that's not necessarily what I mean. So, number 4, you are not 100% committed. If you want the life of your dreams, you must be 100% in. You do not get to be 99% in, because 99% commitment, this comes from Richard Rudd, the founder of the Gene Keys, is the same as 1% commitment. Say it again, because it's that important. 99% commitment is the same as 1% commitment. You're either in or you're out. And how you know this is take a look at your life. Not what you think, not what you say. Take a look at your life. Are you scrolling all day long? Are you consuming stuff constantly? Or are you actually out there making things of value for the world? Are you meditating? Are you exercising? Are you eating clean? Are you praying? Are you doing all of these things that develop a relationship with the universe, with God? Think about it. You're asking for something. Do you want to give unconditionally of yourself if you see that the other person isn't trying at all? No, and the universe is doing it not because it doesn't love, but it's doing it so that you can see that you are holding yourself back. It's doing it out of love, in fact. But when you start to show up with 100% commitment, you better believe the universe is going to start to show up with 100% commitment. So you've got to do the work. And I don't just mean the manifestation practices. I mean the other 23 hours and 40 minutes of your day. You've got to learn the wisdom texts. You've got to learn the universal principles. You've got to raise your frequency. You've got to connect to humanity. You've got to find your purpose, your genius. You've got to share it with the world. I think people think that you just get to sit back and wait for these things to come. And once your frequency matches, sure, that's the case, but inertia, right? It takes a little bit in the beginning to get things moving, to get your frequency to where it needs to go. Then we can rest a little bit. We can relax a little bit more, but it's always a little bit more difficult in the beginning. And then the sentence that really hurts us, I'll do this if, ... I'll do this if the universe gives me X, Y, and Z. I'll do this if I get this thing in return. I'll do this if this person does that. The universe does not know conditional love. So if you say, I will do this if, that's conditional love. And it's going to be struck down from day one. So you have to do all of these things without the expectation that the manifestation is going to start working. You've got to do it because you want to do it. You've got to do it because you want to change your life. And it is worth it. I promise you, it is very much worth it. All right, our fifth and final thing is actually the thing that I wrote second. This one just kind of spilled out of me, which they do sometimes, but oftentimes they are not in order. So last one. This is another one that might be tough to hear. You don't know what you actually want. And I know you're thinking, yes, I do. I want that boat. I want that car. I want that house. I want that $10 million. I hear you. I hear you. But in reality, you don't want those things. What you want is what those things bring. Power, a sense of ease, a sense of peace, a sense of security. That's what you're really after, and that's the frequency ultimately that we need to tune in. But what I'm really talking about here is something deeper than that. To manifest, you must break free of the collective. So on a societal level, on a collective level, all of humanity, the frequency is in what I call the shadow. It's from the system called the gene keys that I do a lot of my videos on. It's this low frequency, this victim state. That's where the collective is right now. And so if you identify with the way that society and the world is structured right now, you're never going to be able to manifest because you're lumped into that low frequency of the collective. And what that low frequency believes is if I only have X, Y, Z on the external, then my internal state can shift and change. We've got to break free from that shadow frequency. And then another component of it is we've got to break free and be willing to be seen. So when you break free from the collective, this rebellious spirit comes forth, right? People see you as a little bit of a threat because you don't move through the world like so many other people move through the world. And that means you've got to be willing to be seen. And that is hard work because when you're different, you better believe that you are going to start taking fire. I had a mentor, and what he said was, anytime you plant a flag, people are going to start shooting. In other words, when you stand for something, somebody is going to take the opposite stance and they're going to let you know about it. So you've got to be ready for that. You've got to be broken free. You've got to be an individual. You've got to be ready to handle some heat because people are not going to see the world in the same way that you see the world, and that's okay. And if you're constantly triggered by people saying things to you that are of a different world view from you, commenting things on stuff that you make, your frequency is constantly going to be sucked down and you do not have a chance in the world at manifesting anything. Next big piece of this is that ego is powerless. So that you see as you, that I that you call I, that's your ego. And it does not have the ability to manifest anything. Remember I went and I talked about the subtle bodies and I mentioned the causal body or soul? That's really the unification of physical, astral, and mental bodies. Right? It filters together and comes into union and it starts to take on this new quality. And that causal body is the thing that's got all the juice, not the ego. And your causal body has totally different desires than you have. Another term for this would be your higher self. So if that's the case, you've got to do some things that disconnect you from your ego and instead, I released the highest one, that's okay. And instead, learn to connect to your higher self or to your causal body. So we've got to do those practices, which there's not going to be anything that's earth-shattering here. And again, I'm going to save this for another video, but it's things like meditation, journaling, creativity, that sort of thing. Next is we've got to release childhood conditioning. So our ego is trapped or stuck by our childhood conditioning, by the things that we believe. We develop in our childhood what are called limiting beliefs. And there are things that make their way into our emotions and our way of thinking. Because honestly, because we didn't have the tools to deal with what was happening in our external life, right? We're a kid and there's a lot of intense things happening. And instead of seeing and dealing with what's actually happening, we internalize it and we put these beliefs on ourselves. We've got to release that childhood conditioning because it's what keeps you trapped in your ego. When you're able to let that go, you're better able to connect with your higher self, with that causal body. Lastly, as I said, it's understanding that your soul has different desires. And this will take some time. As you do the external work, the internal work, you'll get deeper and deeper, and your desires of the things that you're trying to manifest will shift and change. And that doesn't mean that you don't manifest some of the older stuff along the way. That will happen too. It's kind of a fun part of the journey. But eventually, you're going to get to a place where you see the truth of what you really and truly want. And when you know what you really and truly want, what your soul really and truly wants, it's a matter of time before manifestation starts to take place. So I hope that was helpful for you. I try to give a little bit fuller of a picture so that you can understand why, with having done all of these things, it's still not working for you. My name is Cohen. I teach about a system called the Gene Keys, other esoteric things like this today. I'd love to see you around the channel. I do some free stuff like a Zoom call every couple weeks. So if you're new here, thanks for being here. It was a pleasure. Until next time.